Having fun? Yeah? Did you like Bash last night? Yeah, that was a blast. Awesome stuff. You guys really delivered on the carnival events. Thank you so much for being with us. And if you want to make your way up here, we had a few things we wanted to mention first before we get started. Wanted to extend a very big thank you to our sponsors of Signal, people who've helped us to make this conference a reality. So thank you very much. Let's hear it for all the sponsors who have helped us make this reality. All right, so as you know, and I mentioned yesterday, we announced last year at our Twilio Con that we wanted to help nonprofits to use Twilio and engage with us in a special way, and so we announced Twilio.org as a vehicle to help nonprofits to grow their ability to communicate. And there's another vehicle that we had in the past. Early on in the company, we had a thing called Twilio Fund. And this was a collaboration with some investors to give seed stage financing to help new ideas in the world of communications to get off the ground. And we're excited to announce today that we are bringing back Twilio Fund as a vehicle. Yes. We're bringing back Twilio Fund as a vehicle to connect great ideas and great entrepreneurs with investors who can help you grow the business. But there's one difference in how we're doing this. First of all, we've brought together some of the best venture capital investors in Silicon Valley to participate in Twilio Fund. Bessemer, DFJ, and Redpoint. And we work with all of these investors already, and so I can tell you that they are already bought in to the future of communications happening with software developers. They understand the opportunity ahead and are ready to invest. Now, one difference I'll state is that we are going bigger this time around. And in fact, Twilio Fund is now a $50 million investment vehicle. Can you give me 1 second? I actually want to do that again. I confused them backstage. Hold on. Ready? Oh, okay. Slides are fun. All right. So we've got a $50 million fund from some of Silicon Valley's best investors to help accelerate and grow the ideas and the products and the companies that you're building to invent the future of communications. And so we're really excited about the opportunities that this brings for you. And this is a collaboration between both the investors and from Twilio. See, companies who are going to be a part of this will get collaboration from Twilio in the form of credit to help scale, as well as special assistance from our architects and our support team to help you grow your business, as well as the meetings, introductions, and follow-on from the investors. And I want to talk through a few of the companies who've participated in Twilio Fund in the past. You know, one of them up here is Babbelverse. They're a company that had this amazing idea to crowdsource translation using Twilio. Another company, TalkDesk, allows you to create a call center in 5 minutes. And they created, one founder, one entrepreneur, Tiago, was actually up on the stage at the initial TwilioCon, presenting the thing that he had built. And now he's growing and scaling an amazing company. And the other one up there, Wedgies, interesting. It's a social, real-time social polling application. You know, take polls, like vote on this and that, like tell us what you're doing. And they were all in real time using Twilio. And what's interesting is they went from being a Twilio Fund applicant to last year powering the real-time feedback for the State of the Union address for the president. How cool is that? And as part of our announcement of Twilio Fund, we're also announcing its first investment is a company called Speakeasy, a $1 million investment in Speakeasy to help fix conference calling and make it so conference calls don't suck. Is Speakeasy in the audience? Yeah? Awesome. Congratulations. They're the first participant in the new Twilio Fund. If you are interested in being a part of Twilio Fund, visit twilio.com/fund to sign up to get more information about how the process is going to work and how you can apply. All right. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce up our Builders panel. And the moderator for this panel, we've got some amazing folks. I can't wait to hear what they have to say. But to introduce this panel and to moderate this panel, please welcome up the editor-at-large for Information Week, Tom Claburn. Come on up, Tom.
Hey, Jeff.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hi, thank you. So I'd like to bring out our panelists. We have with us Justin Kahn, a partner at Y-Combinator and founder of Twitch TV and Justin TV. Welcome.
Right there.
Anywhere you want. Next, we have Jessica McKellar, the founder of Zulip and engineer at Dropbox and contributor to many open source projects. And we have Harper Reed, the founder of Modest and the former CTO of Obama's Chicago campaign headquarters. Come on out, Harper. There he is. And last, Eric Ries, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Lean Startup and Entrepreneur. Come on out, Eric. Thanks all for being here. So this being a developers conference, we're going to start with developers. Recently, I was at a tech event in San Francisco, and held by another company, and the theme of it was that the developer is king. And given that there might be a few developers in the audience, that seemed like kind of an appealing idea. But is that actually true? I mean, is the developer king in this area, and how is that different elsewhere in the country or in the rest of the world?
You know, I travel the world a lot now and see all these emerging startup hubs, and I feel like in a lot of places in the world, like people have only recently gotten the memo about the power of software and the power of developers. So, you know, a lot of us, you know, I came to Silicon Valley maybe 15 years ago, and for me it was like coming to Mecca or some kind of like amazing place where all of a sudden the skills that I had valued my whole career and really my whole life since I was a kid, like programming in my parents' basement, you know, like a lot of us, were all of a sudden valued and were considered commercially relevant and unlocked a lot of power. So I think that's certainly true here. You know, I don't know if necessarily the king metaphor is especially flattering, though, given what's happening in Silicon Valley. But I feel like in a lot of places in the world, like that, people are starting to get the memo, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that trend towards, you know, developer education and towards wanting programming and computer literacy to be really a core part of people's careers and education.
Right. I mean, you know, here developers are intimately involved in the founding of companies. They're often technical founders. Is it different elsewhere? I mean, if you are starting a company on the East Coast, or if you're starting a company in London or you know, somewhere else in the world, in Asia, is that the same pattern, or are there other forces at play?
I think they're
YC, I think, has done more to change this paradigm than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like, I think in Silicon Valley specifically, developers are the bottleneck of, you know, making startups grow and happen. And they're like, for every startup, they're the kind of the limiting factor in kind of getting to the next step, right? Like every startup I know that we funded in YC is like, how do I hire more developers, or how do I hire my first engineer who's like not a founder? I think around the rest of the world, it's not quite there yet because the funding environment is not so great that there's like this massive number of startups getting started. So I think, yeah, here, if you're a programmer, a competent programmer, you should go out and get a raise. You all deserve a raise. I'm serious. You probably do.
I mean, you find there's a shortage of developers, and
yeah, there's absolutely. I mean, you've seen all these like, you know, programs to train people to be developers in 10 weeks, and you know, those people go out and get really high-paying jobs right afterwards, you know, popping up, and I think that speaks to the fact that there's this huge, you know, supply-demand gap.
Mm-hmm. Well, is that kind of education the most effective? I mean, compared to, say, a traditional computer science degree, are people going into 10-week programs, you know, competing against those people, or is that a different set? Is that a different skill set? I mean,
well,
there are a couple of things going on here. So one thing I think is really positive is that given that at least it feels like there is a developer bottleneck, companies are learning how to evaluate a broader set of profiles, identify the raw ingredients that can be turned into like really great developers and engineers at companies, and then have better internal training So that's really positive, and so some of the bootcamp folks feed into this process and this broadening of the profiles. I think that someone is going to figure out what to do with the folks who've done these 2 or 3 month boot camps and need another 6 to 12 months of real software engineering experience before sort of truly being competitive against folks who had a 4-year CS degree. And whoever unlocks that is going to be in a very powerful position. I don't think we figured that out yet.
It's definitely not a replacement for actual computer science education, but I think that a lot of what people need developers for is really just churning out fairly simple CRUD apps that sit on top of other APIs, and a lot of after 10 weeks you can kind of like start working, like start learn. You know enough that you can like start working on that, so that in a year you'll actually be semi-competent at making something.
Right. What's the distance between 10-week coding school and company CTO or co-founder? I mean, what is that? That's not something that happens right away.
5 years of programming.
Yeah.
I want to jump in real quick about the developer is king thing. I actually don't like that very much. The first reason I don't like it is very simple. It kind of excludes half of our population from participating, which is kind of a bummer. The second thing is, I've done a lot of technology, as many of you probably have, and one thing I notice is that although we are developers, oftentimes developers have this language which is very ego-based, which is all about I can solve this for you. And it usually should be about this team, about working together, and oftentimes I think the key is the people that are not necessarily developers, whether it's the customer, whether it's the person that you're helping inside of your organization. And if we continue on this trope of like the developer is the only person that can solve the problem, then we're going to be building very boring companies for ourselves. And these are not going to appeal towards the people that are in middle America. They're not going to appeal towards the people who are all over the world. And there's a lot of markets that, honestly, US companies are behind in impacting. And so that's something that I worry about that meme.
So what can be done to bridge the gap and to make the developer community more engaged with the non-developer community and the rest of the people who are going to be involved in the companies that they're working on? Is it a management issue? Is it an education issue?
I think it's starting by not assuming that developers are king. I think that's a good start. The second thing is, although my background is engineering, I'm a developer. I've spent a lot of time as a developer. I really like programming. I like to live by Dr. Dre's famous words, touch code every day. And but the thing here that I think is important is that's not like we're not here because of code. I mean, ostensibly we are, but I think we're here because we like to solve problems. And there's a lot of other people that like to solve problems, and acknowledging that problems can be solved by many people in your organization. One of my favorite examples of this is when I was at Threadless, we had a warehouse, and we'd always try and code the warehouse and solve the problems with code. But what ended up solving the problem was a clipboard and paper. That has nothing to do with code. We just watched people how they worked naturally, and then that led to code later. But if we lead with code, we're just going to boil down all of these things that people are doing to solve real problems. And don't get me wrong, technology augments. Technology is a force multiplier. But I think sometimes as developers, we think technology is the only reason we're here. And we're actually here for a much different reason, which is customers, which is people who are using it. And often I think this trope of developers are king is not doing that any justice.
Well, is it the opposite? I mean, are developers serfs? I mean, do we need to?
Well, I think that
there is that argument as well. I mean, certainly if you get into the H-1B issue, it can be.
No, I think we're looking way into this. I think the idea of like a royalty and developers or anyone in a company is bullshit.
Right.
But there is, don't pedestalize any particular function. It's a bunch of functions working together to solve problems.
Right. But there is obviously a communication gap between the technical side and the non-technical side of things.
It doesn't have to be. Sorry.
Doesn't have to be.
Are we?
Where is it working really well? Where do you see the sort of the non-technical side and the technical side getting along really well? I mean, do you have examples in the companies that you've dealt with?
I would posit that any company that we think is successful, it's largely working.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah.
We can name a lot of places where it gets totally messed up, but it's like if it's working, it's probably working, right? I mean, not to not answer your question at all. But it's like, I think it's a hard question to answer. Of course, there is tension between sales and business, or business and sales and tech, of course. But also that's healthy to help move the company forward. I don't know if there's an answer, and I don't think necessarily trying to think of where it fails is helpful.
Right.
You know, one thing I see a lot of is you have startups that begin in a super cross-functional way. Everyone's in the same room, everyone's on the same team, everyone's doing every job, and you have that kind of really rich collaboration that makes it possible to get to product market fit. And then people start to grow a company, and there's this moment where like, well, we gotta become a real company. We have to professionalize, and it has to become more mature. Like all these euphemisms for we have to build. And I think the reason people use these kind of feudal and aristocratic metaphors is because we're going to build this like feudal system now, where everyone will be in their caste, and there'll be special siloed departments where people do their thing and they rise through the ranks. And if the boss tells you to do something, then you always do it. And I see a lot of companies that like, not intentionally, but they transform into the very company, the kind of company they never wanted to be themselves. So a lot of people become entrepreneurs because they hate big companies, and they hate that bureaucratic, slow decision making and all this, the meetings and everything. And I always ask them the same question. It's like, if you hate big companies so much, why are you trying to create a new one?
Is the answer to do what Zappos did and get rid of the management layer?
Well, I don't think management is the problem per se. I think it has a lot to do with what are the values of leadership. How are people held accountable? Who gets promoted and why? And if you start to promote people for doing their narrow technical function well, at the exclusion of solving real problems for customers, you start to build in these different siloed cultures, and that, to me, that's the root cause of the problem. So it has a lot to do with HR policy and the kind of systems that govern most companies, and that's not a very exciting and sexy answer, I know, but that's really where the problem starts. And so for those of you who are in a leadership position in the organization that you serve, if you don't like the level of innovation and communication and empathy that you're seeing in your teams, then you got to look in the mirror, because now you're looking at the problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a level of communication technology that is now sort of a given thanks to all these platforms and APIs, but there doesn't exist a parallel for management and human interaction, and that still seems to be built from scratch every time. I mean,
yeah, what I think is interesting is that it's built from scratch every time, but to an extremely rigid template. I see the same problems company after company after company because they have the exact same org chart. Even like very recent companies that are 5 years old and are extremely innovative in every way. It's like, let me draw you your org chart, let me draw you General Motors org chart, and theirs is bigger, but they're the same shape and structure, same systems. And so I think, as people who are in more entrepreneurial situations, we have to really think to ourselves, if we want to build a company that's going to really persist for the long term and that can grow through continuous innovation, we have to be thinking about not just how do we make innovative, cool products, but how do we build an innovative culture? How do we manage people in an innovative and meritocratic way?
Well, how do we? I mean, what sort of answers do you, generally give companies who are wrestling with that kind of problem? And is there a specific example of some company that's building, say, not a lean startup, but a sort of bloated and inefficient one that you know?
Yeah, I work in two very different worlds. I work with companies that are, like a lot of companies that were really early adopters of Lean Startup that, 5 years ago thought Lean Startup was very cool. And at the time I was talking about, entrepreneurship is the management discipline that deals with situations of high uncertainty and all this culture management stuff. And like at the time, most people were like, yeah, okay, but minimum viable product, that's cool. And you could put that on a bumper sticker. And like that, people took away some of the the easier to digest, more fun parts of Lean Startup. And a number of those CEOs have called me in recent years to say, hey, remember that management thing you were talking about? Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I don't understand. I'm a great founder and I do things in a really entrepreneurial way, but I have all these people that work for me and they're making decisions using like basically waterfall development. And I'm like, where did they learn that? Not from me. I don't understand that. They're not thinking like an entrepreneur. And I think a lot of us struggle with having to make that transition from you're the founder, you're the decision maker, to you're the person who supports other people in making entrepreneurial decisions. And then I also talk with super established companies, very big bureaucratic companies and governments who want to transform and be more, kind of re-inject that entrepreneurial DNA back into the company. And the weird thing is, we talk about the exact same things, which is how do you hold people accountable? How do you teach entrepreneurship as a corporate function? Like imagine that there wasn't a function called engineering, there wasn't a function called marketing. Like there was a time when those functions didn't exist and companies were worse for it. Most companies today don't have a functional area of excellence around entrepreneurship, and I think that's a huge, huge gap.
How does that play out in more traditional companies and government organizations, the entities that we sort of perceive, at least from our perch in Silicon Valley, as being behind the times there? Are they innovating in the same way? Do they have to take a different path to sort of take advantage of the way that technology is moving, where you have a lot of services that you can just kind of plug in and change your business model on the fly?
I didn't believe it the first time I saw it. The first time someone asked me to come talk about lean government, I was like, is that not an oxymoron? Like, what are you talking about? That seemed like totally ridiculous to me. But there's a whole movement now to bring these services, this kind of like this digital thinking, but also this like process and lean thinking into governments, into cities. There's a huge initiative at the federal government. I'm sure none of you saw Todd Park yesterday talk about the United States Digital Service. So it's happening and it's real. And what's strange is that you don't see it on TV. Like if you watch our political shows and you read about politics, like this kind of problem solving that's happening is not getting a lot of attention, but it is real and it's very exciting.
And in my experience on a campaign was, it is not agile. Someone once asked, like, what is the thing you hope people like take away? You had all this great technology, built all this neat stuff, and I was like, I would throw all of that away if they would take away just simple agile methodologies for technology. We had this experience where we once released a product, and it was obviously this MVP kind of thing. We were like, here it is, check it out, let us know what we should fix, let's give it to users. And everyone ran around like we were insane, because they were like, it's not done. And we were like, well, yeah, it's the first version. It's an easy, we're just going to fix it as you tell us, how like that. We're adding features. And before that, every single experience they had with technology was they sent a spec out, and then the software product came back, and it was done, and that was it. And there was no more iteration. There was nothing. And so simple ideas like iterative development, which many of us just based on like compiling or anything, that's kind of what we have in our heads for everything. Simple ideas like that just are not native to many places. And so I like to think of it, what is the stuff that we can take from coding that we can apply towards organizations? Like testing, iterative development, kind of iterating your way through something, acting more like water than like concrete or something else that doesn't move. And it was fun. So it's hard though.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of the coding culture is percolating into just sort of more general management structures. I mean, I think about the conversations I've had with people at Google about how they evaluate personnel and very data driven. It's a lot more like the analytics that people use for their apps are also being applied to people processes and things like that. I mean, is there a level of sort of analytics that companies have to get on board with to take advantage of the way that technology is changing and to and have their technology be efficient? I mean, can you get away with not paying attention to that, to sort of the things that you've automated and hopefully can just set aside?
We're kind of hogging the panel down here.
I know.
Yeah, you guys are
weighted over here.
I don't know anything about big companies.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the question is like, should you have good monitoring and analytics? And the answer
yeah,
is
APIs in a sense it's a form of automation, and when you automate something, you tend not to have as much insight in it because it's running on its own. Yet we have all these analytic services for apps, and it seems like it's something that there should be attention paid to that, and you can't really have the technology without also having the processes to monitor them internally. I mean, both your apps, but also maybe you're applying that to your organization as well.
I agree.
Yeah, one of the first things they said to me on the campaign, besides "don't fuck it up," was also if there isn't a metric, it doesn't exist. There's this kind of mantra that we had internally where it's like, if you cannot measure it, you shouldn't be talking about it. A very simple thing, and I think that to answer your question, it's just kind of like, yes, they should. Like, there's not like more, like it's one of those things that it's such a per business thing that it's like I don't know. I mean, I would love if more big companies were metrics driven. But one of the things that I think you have to admit with metrics driven organization is sometimes that becomes very boring. And it does get automated, but it depends what you're building, right? Like when we were building t-shirts at Threadless, we often knew this shirt would sell really well, but we thought it was stupid. So we just didn't do it. And we used our gut to kind of do some of that stuff. I used to say we were a gut-driven development. We were like, is this fun? Yes, keep doing it. That was the metric. That did not make a big business, but it made a really fun business that's, did pretty well.
So going back to education for a second, is there something more that we need to do in terms of teaching people about technical ways of thinking as they go through primary and secondary school? I mean, should we be teaching coding at the elementary school level, the middle school level? When should people be exposed to it, and what form should it take?
Totally. So two things here. So one is there's teaching people how to program, and there's digital literacy. I think absolutely everyone in all schools in the United States should be going through some sort of digital literacy course. This is like knowing how to type 50 years ago. Everyone should have some basic understanding of how computers, how the internet work, what their rights are as digital citizens, how to safely engage as a citizen of the internet, and those things are, and how some of the decisions that have been made about these systems affect themselves in their day-to-day lives. When these things are in the news politically, I think everyone should have some basic understanding of vocabulary around that. And there are some universities that teach classes that are like this, but there should be more of that in high school and earlier as well. Because by the time you're in college, you've been on Twitter and Facebook and everything for 10 years already. So there's that. I think that unequivocally should be something that everyone is experiencing. Should everyone learn how to program? I personally think that everyone should at least have the opportunity to learn how to program. And actually, if you look at the statistics, that's not true. Roughly only 1 in 10 students truly has the opportunity to learn how to program at the high school level. And if that number sounds absurdly low, it's because it is absurdly low, but that's the reality. It's really tough in the United States because education is something at the state level, not at the federal level, so there's some element of reinventing the wheel 50 times, but there's certainly been a lot of progress. A couple of key barriers that we are overcoming over time include that the high school curriculum is very, very crowded. So it's very difficult to introduce something because you would have to pull something out. And the main trick being used here is to make a computer science class, a programming class, count as some sort of math or science credit. And that has been very effective for, the great students don't have time to take electives, and the students who aren't sure what they want to do don't take random electives anyway. So making it count for something that contributes to their graduation requirements, absolutely. Like there's lots of data that this boosts enrollment in programming-related classes at the high school level. So that's one big thing. There's no real teacher training for computer science classes at the high school level, and there aren't a ton of established curricula. So that's another, that sort of level of training and certification is another big aspect of this. And then the third thing is that a lot of what's happening in high school is driven by what's happening in colleges. There's this trickle down about what languages we use, what curricula we use, and that has produced for us like the old advanced placement computer science curriculum, which is super fucking boring. And so nobody wants to take that class, even though many people would absolutely enjoy engaging in the type of problem solving that taking an interdisciplinary programming class would allow you to do. So a really exciting thing is that a bunch of national curricula are being developed. There's actually a new AP class about computational thinking, much more interdisciplinary, much more fun, much more appealing to a diverse audience. And I'm very excited to see that roll out in the next couple of years, because that will hopefully vastly broaden the funnel for who is engaging in programming at the high school level. Why am I harping on high school? There was a study that came out a couple of years ago that indicated that if you hadn't already taken a programming class by the time you were in high school, you were exceedingly, exceedingly unlikely to pursue some sort of computer science related major in college. So it's like if you weren't doing it by high school, it was too late. And that's bad for diversity in the field, and it's bad for sort of equitable access to the field.
I saw there was, this is a little while ago, there was like a Stack Exchange thread where people were discussing like at what age did you start programming first, and then somebody had made a histogram all the end. It was an extremely nerdy thread, as you can imagine. And I think something like the median age was something like 7. It was like extremely young. It really struck me because that was my experience too. I was like, don't joke about being in the parents' basement with the computer, but like I recognize now like what a privilege that was. That in whatever in the mid 80s when like programming was not especially well known as a career that like we would want to do, like my parents had a computer in the house, they could afford to do that, they thought it was fine for me to spend time on it, I had a safe space, like we joke about the basement, but that was actually a pretty awesome place to be programming. And not everybody has that, and I think that given how many people, I'm sure even in this audience, how many programs are fundamentally self-taught, certainly in the early years, who discover their passion for it, like I feel like we should be as concerned about access to the raw materials of computational not just computational thinking, but computing devices, but not just iPads, but open devices that people can actually hack and program on. Like we would just be focused on like the basic equity of access to those materials as much as to formal curriculum, because I know so many great programmers who, because they had that opportunity at a young age, later on were able to pursue a love of programming and enter into formal schooling. But those kind of formative years, I think for a lot of people, there's just not that access, and that I think is a real shame.
So, I mean, looking at the climate for startups now, I mean, if there is this technical talent shortage, what does it look like from Y-Combinator's point of view? I mean, are you seeing fewer startups starting, or is it the opposite? Are more people trying to
Well, more and more people are trying to start startups than ever before, both like technical people and non-technical people,
right,
and teams of technical and non-technical people together.
And is it mainly because of the ease with which the technical barriers can be overcome has fallen? I mean, is it, or?
I think there's a couple things, like it's easier to start a business. It's more socially acceptable. Like ever since, it's kind of cliche, but like the Social Network movie coming out, I think was a big turning point in like lots of people who were previously not interested in starting companies becoming interested in starting companies in the US. It was, maybe it's not due to the movie, but it was like kind of around that time, all of my friends who were in finance or consulting were like, oh, how do I start a startup? And it's just this cultural shift where people are trying to start all sorts of different businesses. Some of them are like tech-enabled, many of them are. Some are just, other small businesses that I think it's a cooler thing to do now. And the second thing is I think that there's just more opportunity to build like a tech-enabled business in other industries. Like you see, not just pure software businesses, but all these businesses that are e-commerce businesses that are primarily selling directly to consumers through the web. See these like apps that let you, call something in the on-demand economy, like whether it's a valet or like a, dry cleaning. There's
operations businesses that are accelerated by the software, the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world for sure.
A lot of businesses are marketing primarily through the internet too, and do a lot of things that are like other tech companies do. Like they A/B test landing pages, and they try to figure out how to like get more people to convert, and they test lots of different digital channels. So I think like more and more businesses are tech enabled, and all those businesses kind of like require some level of programming. So you've seen this massive shortage, and to fill that shortage, you can either wait, start a bunch of 7-year-olds on like, and wait 14 years to like get them to become, programmers who have passed college, or you can, kind of do all this retraining that you've seen pop up, which kind of works, but, obviously could be improved a lot.
Right. Is anybody making it work essentially without the technical knowledge where, because the APIs are so easy to use, they're just, putting together companies with a good idea and outsourcing the coding and essentially being the, the business drivers?
I think the bar has come down a lot more. So like people who are barely programmers can kind of hack something that, is an MVP, like a very, very, minimal viable product, and get it out there and like kind of test their assumptions basically. So you've, from my own experience, I've hired actually several people from these boot camps, and they weren't really great, but they were good enough to like do some really crappy work that people who are good programmers didn't want to do, and that's how they got their start, and many have gone on to be pretty successful.
To spin that a little bit, so what a boot camp is there's a broad spectrum of these experiences, but certainly a lot of what I've seen is very smart people. These are folks who have advanced degrees in other fields. The job market is changing in those other fields, but like they're very smart, they're great problem solvers, and they just haven't been exposed to programming, and there's just a ton of potential there if we can figure out how to condense the time that it takes to develop the intuition as a good software engineer. That just takes time, and if we can figure out how to condense that time, there are a lot of really smart people who absolutely can do great work.
Well, and they're unfortunately programming in Excel right now, and they don't even know it.
Yeah. So there's
Excel wizards are some of my favorite people.
They're unbelievable. The talent required to be productive in that environment.
So,
astounding.
We actually spent a lot of time thinking about how do we hire people from the boot camps, because that's exactly correct. They're these very smart people who have this want to be there, which I have to admit, I have interviewed a lot of engineers, and some of them don't want to be there, but they happen to have a degree from an engineering school that we all admire, and so we're like, well, they must be good. But actually, for me, what good is when you can solve a problem well and you have a passion about it. And I would rather hire someone from one of these boot camps and put them in a junior role and take a risk on whether they are able to do it if they have a passion about what we're working on, than someone who's senior who doesn't care. I'd like to do that every
People
day.
who spike on ownership and all of these non-technical values that actually matter for working in a collaborative environment, that's what actually matters.
One of the things I noticed about my own life is that when I started programming, I was terrible. And so this expectation that every single person that starts programming has to, for some reason, be as good as myself with 25 years experience doing this is insane. And so what we've done in our organization to kind of solve for that is we don't expect that the boot camp style learnings should be that engineer, but we do expect that they'll grow into it. And so we're willing to take that risk on someone, but we're not saying, oh, and now you are the lead engineer on our API. But we're saying you are an API developer, and we expect you to grow into that lead. And that means that the team has to help bring them up, that they have to fight for it. And by doing that, then they become just as productive as any engineer you hire. And this has opened up great amounts of people that we would never consider otherwise. Yeah. Because it's all about pattern matching. And when you expand your pattern, you get more people in that net.
Yeah, that times 1,000 too. And we as developers, I think, have to take responsibility for the fact that in a lot of the online and offline communities that we curate and create, we have kind of a toxic culture that is not very welcoming to newcomers, that does not, go ahead and ask a newbie question on any open source mailing list. And, God help you. That kind of vitriol and extremely unwelcoming behavior, I think, is damaging, and really we should start to consider that unprofessional as a behavioral standard. And in fact, some of the best people I've ever hired in my career are the people who are like the kind of unofficial leaders on those mailing lists. So someone writes in with a newbie question, 5 other people write about how they're the spawn of Satan. And somebody has to kind of chime in and calm everybody down and say, listen, this is actually a legitimate question, and let me direct you to the right resources and explain why actually this is a good idea, or whatever. Kind of get that. And whenever I would see that pattern, I would be like, this is somebody who really cares not just about technology. You have to be very smart to be able to answer all those questions and deal with all those concerns, but someone who really cares about the experience of the other people that they're working with and collaborating with. And I think those are some of the smartest engineers I've ever hired.
And there's a word that's missing from this, which you mentioned earlier, empathy.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting. And you should try it out, especially as a developer. It'd help a lot to get very far in many ways. But it's something that I think is missing from hiring. I think it's missing from product development. I think it's oftentimes we keep our users in a hostile position. Oh, the users again. This kind of idea that the users, or the old Linux joke, the losers. It's like this idea that how do we put empathy into all of that stuff, which is something that is different for every culture. Empathy means a different thing for every group of people, but it's something that you can say, how do we put empathy in our hiring process? And I guarantee if you really look into that, it will change your hiring process.
And dovetailing on the broadening the set of profiles that you learn to understand, and what's really great about that is once you've done that and you have these new types of great people in your organization, it forces you to get better at providing the support infrastructure for them, like the career growth frameworks for them, and that benefits everyone. It forces you to develop a stronger engineering culture for everyone in the organization, and that's all. I love new people in open source communities. I love interns. I love new engineers because they force you to get better processes for everyone.
And not to just keep talking about this forever, but my favorite part about having people that aren't from my background is that they're not from my background. And so we're building products for the internet. They shouldn't be products for white dudes. Just throwing it out there. When it's easier for me to hire a dude with a red beard, which redheads are genetically disappearing, women and people of color are not, but it's easier for me to hire a red-haired dude, that's a bad situation that we all need to help with. So expanding that pattern that you're matching to has helped us with that, and I think it would help many organizations as well.
So if the technology is getting easier, and that's part of the thing of the whole conference is that with APIs you can do all these new things. What's hard now?
Recruiting someone to string together everything and build your dream app.
Yeah, and why? I mean, is it what competencies does that require that are not in the sort of the technical side of things? Is it?
I was mostly kidding, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that what's hard is basically the marketplace is more competitive. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's more people building more things. Like we were just talking backstage, there's 2 gasoline delivery services now apparently that have just been funded. So I mean, you have to figure out how to like not just build your product, which I think there's a lot of platforms as a service and various APIs that you can use to very quickly bootstrap a product, but you have to figure out how to like get it to customers and how to like figure out if they're getting value out of it and how to market it, how to like grow your team and hire people and manage them. And those are all the things that I'm seeing. Like maybe 10 years ago when I started, it was like a lot harder to get your product out the door. And now it seems like very trivial to get your product out the door, but very hard to do all these other things that it takes to build a company.
And you know, I wouldn't even agree with the statement that technology is getting easier. I think like, you know, APIs and all these platforms, it dramatically increases the leverage of each individual developer. So a single person can stitch together a massive amount of code, but then like now the number of bugs and problems that they've also stitched together is like combinatorially explosive compared to if they, you know, like if 10, 15 years ago, just creating a product at all was like a remarkable accomplishment. And now we take it for granted that like, well, of course you can create a product, but like then, you know, the basis of competition has moved into who can as quickly as possible iterate and learn from customers and all, you know, all the things that have to happen to make the product successful. But also like, I think there's a whole new technical challenge in like learning to see the whole system of what it is that you've created. So you grabbed a bunch of APIs, you grabbed a bunch of stuff together, and like, can you now think not just like what's happening on your computer in your box? You know, it's a huge challenge. I remember for QA, I used to have this problem hiring QA people because it used to be, you know, you find a reproduction path for a bug and then you log it and then a developer will fix it for you. And I remember talking to a QA person, I was like, listen, if we have a bug that happens 1 in a million requests, then you will never reproduce it in the lab ever in your whole life, even if that's all you worked on for the rest of your life. But for our, you know, for the scale that we were operating at the time, that means that 10 customers a day are having this bug and complaining about it in computer science. So whose responsibility is that? And this is a very traditional QA person was like, well, not mine. Somebody else's. It's like, well, but who? Is it the customer service person who's taking the phone calls responsibility? And they're like, well, the developer shouldn't write code with bugs in it. It's like, yeah, if we had that power, you know, great, we would need QA. But now, like, it's a whole new way of thinking. They're like, we have to really think about whose responsibility is it. Think about the complexity of the whole system and how it operates in the real world versus your very clever, you know, or, you know, big O notation diagram at the whiteboard. And I think that's a much harder problem than, well, I don't know, harder. It's a very hard problem, and it requires kind of very smart, but also very good lateral thinkers. It's not the same as just, you know, cranking out an algorithm in a programming contest. It's a very different skill.
And what about the APIs what do they do to company culture? I mean, does it change do people have to rethink their roles in an API-heavy company? Do you have, you know, less management, more management? Is there a challenge for technical leaders in, you know, committing to, you know, we're going to work with this kind of platform and we're going to use this kind of automation and run this very lean company? Do people, you know, how do technical executives handle that, and how do they conceive of their companies?
You know, I feel like in the era of waterfall and, you know, command and control management and, you know, mainframe computing, like those things all kind of went together for a reason. And like the build versus buy decision and the technical platform decisions that architects and technical leaders would make, the way I kind of viewed it was like you'd first make a determination of like what's the most efficient platform. You'd evaluate the technical characteristics of different platforms and figure out which one is the best fit for our operational requirements. And you would basically hand that decision to a team and say, okay, now team, build the best product you can given this platform. And then the team, you know, maybe the team was very agile and they understood the importance of agility and iteration. So they'd be like, okay, well now let's try to figure out like how can we kind of cobble together experiments or some kind of iterative framework. But like, oops, we're on this like third-party proprietary vendor and doing a deployment takes 30 days. So we're obviously not going to be deploying every 30 days because we wouldn't do anything but deploy 24/7. Like, I think that's, like, for the modern world, that's really exactly backwards. We have to start making our platform and process decisions for agility first. Like, what allows us to run experiments more quickly? What allows us to learn faster? And then once we've chosen the platform that has those best characteristics, then we can worry about the operational and efficiency concerns and make sure that, you know, we do the best that we can in that. And I think that has real consequences for not just technical management, but really for management in general in companies, because now we're empowering every employee to run experiments. We're making experimentation extremely inexpensive. And that means that we as managers can't always expect to have the answers and tell people what to do. We more and more have to tell people, this is the question that needs answering. Now let's go find out the truth. And you go find out the truth and report back. And that's a very different way of thinking in terms of managerial style as well.
Who's killing it right now? Are there any companies that, you know, maybe excluding your own, that you're particularly excited about that you think are doing really interesting work?
Like companies they should all get jobs at?
Yeah, companies they want to find out about, or companies that have impressed you recently with what they're doing.
Well, at YC we've funded over 930 companies. So I love them all. But there's a lot of great ones out there. Like here, I think Algolia is here. They just announced their $18 million round of funding. Great search API. I used it to build my own music site, the Drop. It's like pretty amazing. So like Zenefits is another YC company that just raised a really massive round and are doing pretty awesome stuff in the HR side. And like Teespring, which is pretty cool. I don't know. But there's 927 more that you should check out.
Sounds good.
So I don't really know if I have any companies that are killing it, but one of the ones I'm excited about, and I'm always excited about, is a company called Little Bits that makes, like, one of my favorite experiences as a child is learning how to solder and building circuits and bringing that to a new generation of young people in a way that isn't going to burn you is kind of exciting. I like very non-traditional companies, so like Zenefits is really exciting just because they're solving an intensely boring problem that usually startups and companies solve at the end. Yeah. They're like, oh shit, we need HR, and just wrapping that in a nice interface is very nice. That's a good one. I'm sure there's, I actually find this type of thing, I bet you guys have more interesting companies that we haven't heard of than we do, because there's probably a lot of things on your phone that you use every day that you don't notice. I sadly am using the United app more than any other app, so I would love to hear from that. So maybe afterwards we can talk about that.
Well, maybe that's a cue to throw it open for questions. I mean, does anyone out there have any questions they'd like to ask of the panelists? And it doesn't have to be necessarily your favorite company right now. You could, We have mics up there, so if anyone has a question, please just walk up.
Not all at once.
Okay, come on up.
Hey, how's it going? This question is just for anyone on the panel. After movies like The Social Network and kind of like seeing startups in the news, have you seen a huge influx in founders who want to come in and just make lots of money? Or are you still seeing like a lot of founders that are like, I don't see a product out there that's like this, or something out there that's like this, and I want to build it? What's the kind of ratio between those sets of founders that you guys are seeing?
Justin?
I don't know what the ratio is, but I mean, you definitely see both. I think there's a lot of people who, Silicon Valley is now like a pretty big industry, like a big place that like lots of people are starting companies, and lots of other people are seeing those people make wealth and want to come here because of that. I think it happens actually all the way down the stack, because a lot of people who never considered programming are like going to boot camps because they can find better jobs. So it happens for like company founders, but also people who want to work here. But I still think the best companies are started by people who are like solving their own problem, because it shortens the iteration cycle of like them seeing if it works, because it's like, do I like it? They like build something, test if it's something they would use, and then iterate on that. And I think still all the good companies, all the fastest growing, the best companies, the companies that you hear about and are able to recruit really great teams are ones where you solve your own problem.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. I was actually pretty shocked at the bias against people without computer science degrees on this panel. I find that fairly shocking. I've been in tech for 15 years. I went to a boot camp style thing for disabled people. And I think it's kind of classist. Like, I think a lot of the best engineers I've worked with have been autodidacts, people that have figured it out on their own. And so I'd like you to hear you justify placing people with computer science degrees above, tech is full of innovators. Our history of tech is full of innovators without computer science degrees. So can you just speak to that?
I don't have a computer science degree, and I'm a self-taught programmer after college. Actually, I started working on, actually it's through the process of developing my first company, Kiko, which is kind of like a web calendar, like Google Calendar, that I learned how to program. I still say I'm a shitty programmer, but I'm a decent web developer. And so I've hired lots of people who don't have computer science degrees. I do think there's like some value in going to having a formal computer science education. A lot of the people I've hired who had one like understand things at a like much deeper level than I do. But I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people who don't actually have computer science degrees to become competent programmers and contributors within companies. So two other examples I have, not to hog the questioners, but my youngest brother was a real estate major, or whatever that was, but like in 2010, not a great time to be going into real estate. He ended up going into a boot camp and got a pretty great job afterwards. He's been a programmer for 3 years and is just as good as anyone out there. I think he's become a very talented programmer by doing, basically. And at my last company, exec hired someone out of a boot camp as well, and he was just super hardworking, had a lot of the characteristics we've talked about, people who have kind of made that career change through boot camps, and worked for me for a year, then he went and joined Uber and has been doing really great there. And so I've seen a lot of success kind of on the even contributing code to from people who don't have a formal background. And I
definitely wasn't intending to project that if I did, and I think that's true for you as well. What I think is that the burden is on the industry to develop the understanding of how to evaluate folks coming from a variety of backgrounds, including from boot camps. That's mostly what I was getting at, hopefully.
And for me, I mean, my co-founder, who's the CTO of our company, doesn't have a computer science degree. I barely have one. There was not a lot of effort put into that. But what I actually rate people on a lot is about experience and passion. And I really strongly believe that some of the best people we've hired come from industries that have nothing to do with technology. And I've hired hundreds of engineers, which is weird to say. And some of my favorite ones are people that just don't have a computer science degree. Not that they don't know the concepts or have studied or haven't had that experience, but they'll have a philosophy degree or some weird degree, and you're just kind of like, okay, do your thing. And why I like that is because it brings different style of thinking. Although I joked about a computer science degree, I still sat through an algorithms class. And I was not great at that. But that means that I do have that background, and we can talk about big O notation, and I will fail, but we can talk about it. But that's not how, no, I've done a lot of big stuff, and I've never had a real conversation about big O notation at work.
Yeah.
And so it's just you don't need that.
One last thing.
We're also out of time here, so
let me just say really quick. It's actually a competitive advantage if you can figure out how to extract programming work from people who aren't computer science majors, because everyone is out at MIT and CMU trying to recruit new grads and pay them $120,000 starting salary to be a programmer at Dropbox. But if you can actually get programming work out of people who are not as competitive or not viewed as competitive, I mean, that your company is much better off.
Great. Well, thank you all. I'd like to continue this, but the clock says 0, and they're trying to hustle us off. Apparently, They Might Be Giants is going to be here very shortly. So
get out of here.
Thank you all for your time and attention. I appreciate it.
Thank
you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you. All right. Are you guys ready to welcome up our friends, They Might Be Giants? Come on, are you really ready to welcome up our friends, They Might Be Giants? Please welcome John Linnell and John Flansburgh.
Hey.
Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Sure.
Oh, welcome.
Thank
you. It is great to have you here. And we are looking forward to hearing I hear you make music.
Yes, we'll be gigantic steel buildings are our favorite venue.
You can tell how good the acoustics are.
Purpose built.
Well, it is great to have you on stage. Oftentimes you go and you see musical acts, and it's just music, and all you hear is the song. And I think it's really awesome that you were willing to come and actually talk to us, in addition to just playing your musics.
Yes.
And so thank you very much. In particular, the reason why we wanted to hear from you is I think that the way you've approached your career, the way you've approached building, making, doing, and creating, not just the music, but everything around your music, really resonates with the kind of audience that we have, right? We're kind of geeks, we're nerds, we're doers. Do you identify as geeks?
We grew up in a very different era than now. I think, in the 70s, being an outsider had a very different kind of social status that I think you really wanted to transcend. And so those were our teen years. But I think, we're, definitely interested in culture, and we're interested in sort of pursuing ideas to sort of their extremes. Right. And I think that's all that is part of, the definition of like geeking out is something very familiar to us, becoming obsessed with an idea and sort of taking it as far as you can, and sort of just being self-defined. Those are all like wonderful impulses.
Right, but the point is we're still shell-shocked from being punched in the face for being geeks at an early age. So we're not, we're still a little afraid of that label.
See, we have this great history, though, of really, I think, like composing, like building this infrastructure around like the act that is, They Might Be Giants, right? Like whether it's actually the music, like the accordion, for example. I have to imagine that at this day and age, if you play the accordion as often as you do, like you probably have to really know how it works. Like if you repaired your accordion.
I can do minor repairs on the accordion. We have a guy in our crew who helps me.
Really?
Yes.
He's probably one of the like elite, he's probably the highest paid person in the band, right? Like there's like 4 accordion repair people in the world.
He is one of the only accordion techs working in music today.
Yes.
And of course you had, back in the day, I remember from the first album, the They Might Be Giants album, on the back cover it said, you had dial a song, free if called from work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so this sort of like communications has always been a part of really the act. And it was, if I remember correctly from what I've read, and like tell me if this is right or wrong, that it was just an answering machine in like one of your apartments in Brooklyn.
Yes. It's an unusual, it's a little bit of a Shaggy Dog story, so stop me if I say too much, but basically in 1982 we started the dial-a-song, we started the band, and then soon after we bought a phone machine and put it in my apartment. And at that time, phone machines were actually emerging technology. Like only people in New York City had phone machines.
Like fancy socialites.
Yeah, well, it was like working actors and photographers who had to make people who would have had message taking services. People who had answering services were the first people to buy phone machines, and those were kind of New Yorkers. Your mom did not have an answering machine back then, and people found them very, very strange. But for us, we were just a local band in New York, and there was a tremendous amount of kind of cultural gatekeeping going on. And if you ran a club, you had to make sure that all the bands that played in your club fit the style of your club. So if you were kind of like a gothy club, you wouldn't book this, or if you're a performance art club, you wouldn't book that. So it was very hard to kind of find avenues for what we were doing. And one of the nice things about the dial-a-song service is that it was completely democratic and completely self-defined by our music. And we could just put an ad in the paper and say, call this number and check out this thing we're doing. So in some ways, we got to kind of leap over a whole lot of nonsense. But in other, I think the thing that's hard to remember is that back then, when there were those kinds of gatekeepers, they were also the style makers. They really defined how the culture worked. And you couldn't leap over them completely. There wasn't like a huge DIY industry. There wasn't even college rock. There wasn't even college radio yet. So
colleges had not yet met rock.
Yeah, so
they were still waltzing.
Yeah, so alternative rock was still sort of a glimmer in REM's eye at that time. And we got somewhere with it, but by and large, I think the general response was like, half of it was like, that seems kind of pitiful. There was actually it seemed like it might scan as a bit of a desperate move.
Right. Well, we picked up some sympathy votes. I felt sorry for us.
Did you let it? Could people leave a message too?
At first, initially, yeah, and then eventually it got overwhelming. There was and also demoralizing. I think some of it was just way too negative.
Was there anyone who sat through the whole song and then left the message thinking they were talking to someone else?
Yeah. Oh, well, famously, there's a recording on one of our early compilation records that is just a very small excerpt from, I think, an hour-long conversation that a woman had on a, she was on a conference call calling us, and she had no way to hang up RN when she was finished. So we got this amazing long discussion, which begins about us and then moves on to other subjects.
It actually moves on to a conversation about how the guy upstairs is leaving his bathtub overflowing.
Yeah.
A classic New York conversation.
It was very New York.
But there was also this one very weird aspect to the era where dial-a-song took phone messages, which is that single women all across, or maybe just women in general, all across New York City would have the number on them and give it to boyfriends that they wanted to ditch. So you know, the message that you'd get, I would be listening to the messages, and the message would come in and be like, "Hey, Sarah, it was really nice meeting you the other night. Man, that was a weird message. Hey, listen, I'd really like to get together." And it was just like this kind of grim.
Well, the best part is knowing that, like, it was like a 2-minute song or something.
Yeah,
right? Like they waited the whole.
That's right.
They still didn't get the message. Right?
They were still really desperate to connect with this person.
I think Sarah was really judging the guy a little too soon. He had patience. He had tenacity.
That's right. He had good taste in music.
He could have been a keeper.
Now, did you sit there when you first launched it and you you took out an ad in the paper and just sit there and all of a sudden you see the machine go like "Brr," and like start doing like, remember how you hear the sound of the tape and all that?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, people are calling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly, it's just like it's very entrepreneurial. Like I remember when we launched Twilio, the day we launched, me and my co-founders, Evan and John, are you here?
They are not here.
They're not?
They are distinctly not here.
What is more important? I'll tell you a funny story. I'm going to divert. So John, one of my co-founders, and I, we had this game a long time ago. And I've known John since college. We had this game where you got points. And it's like a lifeline. It's one of those games that never ends in your whole life. Mm-hmm. You get a point every time you're able to sneak the lyrics of a fingertip into conversation without the other person noticing.
Wow. That's a very esoteric game.
It's common, right? Everybody, right?
Yeah.
Right, so the easiest one I found is you just start walking, what's that blue thing doing here?
Right.
Right, and you've got like 2
seconds
to kind of call it out, and if you miss the opportunity, it's like, you got a point.
Excellent. Well, have you, what's the Blink guy? He wrote a fantastic story.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell has this fantastic story about working at the Washington Post, about trying to slip the study raises new and troubling questions. It's definitely worth the read. Because basically him and his co-workers had a contest to see who could introduce the line, "Study raises new and troubling questions," into the most number of articles.
Published.
Yeah, published
so
articles.
It's like provably winnable game.
Yes. Right. Because it's the perfect headline for, an article about a study.
I don't remember what I was talking about before.
Doesn't matter.
We were talking about
I think, tell me, is this true though? So the answer, I read somewhere at some point that you would go through like an answering machine like every few months because the motors would burn out because people kept calling and the tape rewinding and all that.
It was a very analog world. I mean, there also was a place that repaired them in New York City. They weren't open 24 hours a day, but they could have been for us. But it was a long evolution. It's very interesting seeing how the perception of the idea has shifted over the years, because it really was. I was just looking at a interview we were being interviewed by the BBC in like 1990 or 91. We had just had a top 5 hit song, and we were just, we were a pop band, just like any other pop band, on top of the pops, kind of doing our little cultural victory lap. And the interviewer was really fixated on the idea of like how we were just into gimmicks. And she, in a course of a 5-minute interview, she asked exactly 5 questions, and they were like, are you into gimmicks? When will you tire of the gimmicks? Do the gimmicks ever get old? Why do you like gimmicks so much? Please stop with the gimmicks.
She had a bet with one of her coworkers.
It was, exactly. It felt like that. And we were just like all jet lagged and kind of going like, yeah, lady, I don't know about this gimmick thing. But what was strange about it was that by doing the dial-a-song and doing all these things that seem very public and very kind of, pointed out towards finding an audience, we were really not playing the mystery date game of being a pop act. Like the whole thing of being a pop act at that moment was being as unknowable but alluring as possible and having people kind of come into you by suddenly going like, hey, my band's playing down the street and we might have some beers. Like it suddenly seemed
demystified.
Way too
the veil
demystified.
of,
Yeah, exactly. And just like intrinsically uncool. Like, and what's interesting about the culture now is that everything has really flipped a 180 where virtually, like Beyonce is like, doing like, come on over to my streaming service. The world of like putting yourself out there in just kind of a welcoming, unneurotic way is that's where things are at now. It's just a very different kind of sort of the pH balance of the cultural pond water has really changed.
The cultural pond water.
Yeah, well.
So you guys have always been using, like, whatever the technology is of the day, I feel like you've been pushing the boundaries as a musical act and as artists in order to harness it. Like, you had the answering machine at one point. You had, you were one of the first to put MP3s on your website.
We worked with eMusic right as they were launching their crazy thing.
Right. So we had an all downloadable download-only album before that seemed like a good idea, or we did. I don't think we really even.
But Jeff, I do want to point out with pride, we completely dodged the CD-ROM bullet.
That's true.
The interactive.
Yes. Yes.
We were offered crazy money
we
to
didn't
waste.
Get on that train.
We could have wasted a full year of our lives making something that
like everybody
is just landfill now.
Would want the They Might Be Giants experience.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
What's behind door number 2? It's
right.
yeah,
exactly. And my sense is like we were not like ahead of any technologies, but we were looking around to see how we could repurpose what was available. I mean, the phone machine, existed and was new and was obsolete over the course of the time that we were still using. In other words, we didn't find a good substitute for the phone machine well into the period when other people had other systems going on. And for us, the actual physical answering machine was still the best solution for us. So we were kind of, old timers, but, probably by most standards.
But when like most of the music industry was just like throwing lawsuits at everybody.
Right.
You were thinking like, hey, actually having people listen to our music seems like a good idea.
That's true. We never jumped onto the lawsuit thing either.
No.
Maybe that's our next.
We should get more litigious.
Yeah.
Let's
exactly.
Let's call.
If you know any lawyers.
Chuck, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then again, like you were like one of the first to do it without DRM, to offer high quality like FLAC recordings, like all sorts of things.
Well, that was really just a fan listening to fans. We sort of found out about that community through our audience, and they were very vocal and just really wanted it. So we just sort of tagged along on that idea. But I mean, I think in general, like if you see emerging technology as just an opportunity to do something creative, it's a pretty exciting way to kind of live your creative life.
Yeah, I think the one thing that excited us early on, which was maybe the only truly prescient thing that we've done, is we thought people don't want to leave their homes, so we'll get the music to them. And that was, in 1983, when you could only do that through a dial-a-song service. Now,
the original MP3, basically.
Yeah. So that was now it's just normal. But
so we started saying like this. So the machines kept burning out, and like you'd keep buying new ones, and you retired it in like startlingly late. Like it went out for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, the machine retired itself by just being unfixable at a certain point.
Did you literally keep repairing the same machine?
We did. We had a stack of these Record-a-Call 375s. Which were great machines in their day. They had a cassette with an unlimited outgoing message, and a separate cassette with the that would record the call. So it was very perfect for us, and there were no other machines that did that.
And also the fidelity was shockingly high.
That's right.
Like all the, a lot of the contemporary telephony is very bandwidth limited because they figure you're just leaving a voice message. There's no, I mean, I don't know how many other people were putting music on their phones at the time, probably none, but for whatever reason, it just happened to sound pretty good.
Did you do anything, you didn't do anything special when you recorded them or like transferred them? You didn't try to make them sound good?
Well, we did. We had to limit, in some ways, this really informed our whole process because all of our demos were funneled through Dial-A-Song, and Dial-A-Song forced us to simplify the arrangements so that you could make sense out of them over the phone. So I think probably there's certain tics that we still are interested in: loud lead vocal up front, not too fussy. I mean, our impulse was always to over-arrange things, but we were very much limited by what you could.
We would have been much more closer to Brian Eno if we had not.
That's right. Yeah.
If we had not done the Dial-A-Song.
Wall of answering machines.
Well, yes. If only we'd had a wall of answering.
The cruelest thing about the phone machine was that if somebody didn't like the song, we knew right away because it would start up and then 20 seconds later, it would
hang up,
rewind.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would be like, well, that ain't working. So we would actually put we would tend to make the vocals very loud so people would hear the words. We also came to understand that people really liked the words, which, was, I mean, we're songwriters and, we're hooked into melody and all sorts of other things besides words, but it did make us, in the same way that like a DJ is probably really aware of the kind of baseline things that audiences really vibrate to, it was hard not to notice that the loud words really.
That's really fascinating that 11 kilohertz,
exactly.
mono is actually an important part of your musical career.
It was an important constraint for us. Also, enunciating was another, I mean, that's something we drew from that, which we still over-enunciate.
Huh. What,
which really cuts down on our day drinking.
It sounds like another interesting point in the musical act of the Giants was you recorded the theme song for The Daily Show.
Yes, we did.
Right, and that is like
although,
been on the air now
a lot of people don't know that. I mean, I think.
You know that?
Speaking of,
nope, they don't know it.
Nobody knows it.
Nobody knows it.
I
mean, speaking of lawyers, like if we had, we should have gotten like that thing in the, in the credit where it's like actually says like theme music performed by the MIP Giants.
Right.
But it was the theme.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah. Credit given where credit is due, the theme was actually written by Bob Mould of the band Husker Du, and he did a glorious job, and we kind of were brought in to make a more kind of orchestrally
we wrote the news music that precedes the guitar theme, which is written by Bob Mould.
The guitar theme was like the all along.
That was the original
and then
theme,
okay, gotcha.
Well, it was only a few months before we were brought in. It was like they basically went
to fix the mess.
To fix the mess.
To be exactly the fix.
I mean, basically the show wanted the veneer of a more real news show, so they added the sort of kind of ABC Nightline intro section, which we also put together for them. And then we redid the Dog on Fire rock theme with.
Is that the name of?
That was the name Bob Mould gave to the theme.
It's called Dog on Fire.
Yeah. Dog on.
Yeah, but we added trombones and sort of just made it a little bit more like to fit in with the rest of the music stuff. So.
And you've done a number of TV shows as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. If you have a child under the age of 5, you are probably very familiar with our standout track, The Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Hot Dog. See, now we're getting a response.
Right.
See, this, and it's like, it's like a very interesting sort of faceless thing to be involved in, but it's, that song, those two songs on the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse are in 24 hours a day across the entire world being played, I mean, about three-quarters of my mortgage has been paid by by that song alone.
So, all right, so I have a question.
I'm a thankful man.
For Mickey,
yes.
For Hot Dog,
yes. Yeah.
Hot Dog, Hot Diggity Dog.
Yeah.
What, so you've got a number of these songs with like mysterious background. You can talk about any number of these, but I have a question about one of them.
Okay.
That I think like a bunch of science geeks would enjoy hearing the background of. So I have a special relationship with Why Does the Sun Shine?
Right.
Ah.
Right? So, you guys know that song? There's the original version, which I love, like the B-side, it was like a B-side, I think, or
It's
it
on
was a single.
On an EP, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you release this song, Why Does the Sun? The sun is a mass of
Yes.
And like people hounded you, like, that's not true.
Well, I think we eventually, I don't remember
what-
anyone complaining, but we eventually worked out that actually the title was wrong. It's not made of gas. Somebody pointed out that stars are made of a fourth state of matter called plasma. And and this song is a mainstay of our show. You know, we still play the original.
Because it goes from this like kind of like xylophone to
Yep.
a totally rocking song live, right?
Yeah.
But
So
then you circled back.
Well, we did a cover.
We wrote a response to. The other thing is, I guess it was assumed for time immemorial, I guess, that the sun was on fire, that it was flaming, and that's what was generating all the heat, and that turned out to be incorrect. And I guess this was probably known when was it Heiser who wrote the.
Well, the lyrics are from the Golden Book Encyclopedia of 1964.
Right.
But
that wasn't. I mean, that wasn't like ancient history. It's like, I think
no.
by then they knew some of this stuff. But in any case, so we had to incorporate these facts into a new song for the science record that we put out about less than 10 years ago, in which we explained that the sun is made of plasma. We had to come up with a rhyme for the word plasma, and the only word we could come up with was miasma. So the new song is called The Sun is a Miasma of Incandescent Plasma, which is also not true. It's not a miasma of anything. But it was an attempt to.
But it rhymes.
We're trying to fix the mistake.
Like physics wasn't born with rhyming in mind. Like the universe didn't accumulate with thinking like, is this going to rhyme well when we talk about?
Right, exactly. If only it were made of gas, and then mass would be an appropriate rhyme.
So can you think of any other song where like you
proves there's
go
no-
back and like fix, like write the apology for the earlier song?
Oh, well, we were just talking about this the other day. There was a point in our career where we were working so quickly that like I actually put together a song, lost the original lyric sheet, and then we recorded the song. And about like a year or two later, I was cleaning out my house and I actually found the original lyrics, and they were so much better. It was extremely frustrating. But I will not name the song because I do not want this in Wikipedia.
That will be like a treasure. Like you'll auction that off.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's like the original lyrics of Yesterday, by Paul McCartney was scrambled eggs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
The dummy lyric.
And I don't know who advised him on that one.
Oh, I think it was that was a case, and then when we do this sometimes, you come up with the melody, and you like the melody, and you're just going to sit on it for a while, but you need to have
You just put some like syllables to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Scrambled eggs. Okay. So
those are some pretty emotional scrambled eggs.
It is. It's the most recorded scrambled egg lyric. Yeah. So you guys brought back Dial-A-Song recently.
We did. Yeah. Basically, we started working on our 17th studio album this last summer, and as we were working on it, we were sort of just thinking like, how much do people ever look forward to a band's 17th album? And
is it really 17?
It is. Yeah, we've made 17 studio albums, and so basically we thought if we embarked on kind of doing some kind of musical project where we released these songs once a week, it would be a way to just kind of fit into the world. Like the way people take in music these days, it's pretty common to just kind of check out a Facebook. People don't even go to people don't even go to websites to see what's happening with the band. They just assume they're going to find out about it through Facebook or social media of some kind. And so we just started posting these things once a week, and resurrected the Dial-A-Song idea. And it's been great. It's actually really sort of brought back, I think, the proper context for what we're doing. People really check in.
And so were a lot of people who are currently consuming Dial-A-Song, were they the same people who were using it 20 or
That's a good question. I would assume there's got to be some new people.
Have you heard from fans saying, I'm so glad you brought it back?
There are new humans since we started Dallas.
I think there's actually a large contingent of people who are completely unaware of the original, who are actually just taking part in this as like just a misguided experiment. And they're I mean, one of the nicest things about it is that they are actually they're participating in something that's happening right now. And so their relationship to the band is not one of just nostalgia. No bands last as long as our band. And I think one of the reasons why is because we actually we've not simply turned into an oldies act.
Yes.
And
we're running in fear from the past constantly.
Yeah. There's huge explosions behind us.
Exactly. We're running in slow motion away from the exploding past is what it is.
But I mean, so people really feel like they're participating in like an ongoing
speed the
thing.
bus, it can't slow down.
Yes.
Exactly.
But like, literally, the old dial-a-song was one phone line into the Brooklyn apartment. So if two people called in at the same time, you get a busy signal.
One of them had to wait. Yeah, absolutely.
And so people are probably constantly getting a busy signal. But now with modern technology, nobody gets a busy signal, right?
No. It's much better now.
That's pretty cool. So I'm actually excited to announce that the new dial-a-song is now powered by Twilio.
Yes. We're happy to be on board.
Which is why you don't get a busy signal.
So if you ever do get a busy signal, you can email me.
That's right. Exactly. The heat is off of us now.
So why don't we take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Would like to.
I think there's a microphone there if anybody's got any questions.
We do. We have a microphone here. Who's got a question?
All over
I've got a question for the audience. What do you figure the price tag on Alcatraz is?
To go there?
To rent, to own.
To own Alcatraz.
To do events.
I don't know. The backstage, our dressing room is like staring at Alcatraz, and I was thinking it seems like it's a...
What a waste.
Well, I mean, you could run the tours anyway, but why not put an internet...
Yeah, you got plenty of space.
Why not put a feisty internet startup company in there? Could save on the buses.
Well, you think about the real estate. People say like, oh, you have a 140-degree view of the bay. Like you have a 360.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some real estate agent is like drooling about this idea right now.
I'm not telling Google what to do, but I'm saying the people of San Francisco would be psyched.
It would be. So we've got a man in a red coat.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Good.
I was kind of wondering, do you guys use any sort of like music composition like apps or technology, and like do you still prefer kind of traditional paper and pen, or can you be productive with like something that's like an iPad or something like that?
We've been using starting when it was a MIDI sequencing application. We've been using Performer for the last, I think, 25 years.
They call it digital Performer now, John.
Yeah, it's digital. Now it's digital. It was just Performer, and I mean maybe just because we're just too feeble to learn something new. That is what we've been stuck with for all this time.
No, I think from the very beginning we've always used our earliest demos. We actually used Music -1, or they were called drum drops, and they were like it was a drummer playing like sort of cliche drum parts, and we would actually write the songs to the drummer. So we've always been into kind of computer-assisted, like machine-assisted songwriting, because it is like an extra little booster rocket on what you're doing. So we'll work on the computer. We can work with loops. We record our own loops. We make our own samples, and often kind of use those as like ways to spark our own imaginations about what's possible. Because if you sample something that's kind of interesting, it can lead to writing a song. I think we're constantly trying to figure out another vehicle, another excuse to write a new song. And it's not just about like finding a good rhyme or finding, getting into the sonic stuff is a great way to do it. So digital Performer has certainly been a help. Samplers and drum machines and all that stuff have been great for us. We love technology.
Thank you.
Sir.
Excuse me.
I've been a huge fan since Animaniacs days.
Excellent.
Now,
wait, did you guys do that song too?
We didn't do the song. We did. It was is Animaniacs the Tiny Toons?
Oh yeah, Tiny Toons.
Tiny Toons.
I'm sorry, you're Tiny Toons. Yeah.
I can tell you the story of Tiny Toons. We were on our second American tour, we were the average pay, we were playing for about 50 people a night. We were getting guarantees of $200 a night, which we did not deserve. I mean, that's important to remember. Like, basically, we were really newbies touring America. We were basically going broke, and our management got a phone call that said, Steven Spielberg is reopening the Warner Brothers animation company. Would you like to be involved? We got a check for $5,000, which at the time, it might as well have been like, we've got a check for $1 million. And we said yes.
But that wasn't your question.
No, yeah, that doesn't count as an answer from me.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Next question.
So I've loved you since then. Now that I have little kids, I hate you because of Hot Dog, which plays incessantly.
We're sorry.
So your kids' music is great. You actually make very, very good kids' music. So my question is it different than the music you made previously? Either tonally or mechanically, or is making kids' music different?
Well, we're very conscious of the fact that it's music for kids, but we also made a conscious choice not to make it crappier because it's for, I had a friend who was like, oh, I see you didn't lower your standards just because,
save that for
because you could get away with it somehow. Kids, can't complain as loudly or something.
Well, there's also this thing about kids' music where it tends to be kind of peaceful, and our kids' music tends to be kind of rowdy in comparison, and it's hard to know why that is. I mean, some kids obviously like peaceful music, but you can't help but think maybe it's really for the moms.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's not quite.
Well, and in that sense, we also, this was another conscious choice. We didn't want to make music that parents would object to having to listen to over and over and over again. Thank you very much. Yes, as a parent, I'm aware of that problem.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I'll tell you one quick thing before. My son loves Birdhouse in Your Soul. And he loves both the live version and the album version. And he asks for it all the time. And I got really sick of actually loading up like the Sonos app on my phone because he'd ask all the time. He says, play Birdhouse, right? And then other times he says, play other Birdhouse, like meaning the live version.
Right.
And so I actually made an Arduino with two big, like a red button and a blue button. That is actually like giant plunger buttons. It's in our house. And he just hits the blue button, and it talks to Sonos, and it plays Birdhouse in Your Soul like throughout our whole house. And it's just like self-service Birdhouse buttons.
I love that, yeah.
That could also be just like a prison sentence.
Yeah.
Well, at least he's got a choice.
Yeah.
I get to decide when it's plugged in.
right. Oh, good. Well, anyway.
Sorry.
Hi, I just want to say thank you because on some of my 7th grade science tests, there was stuff about the music you guys do, and it really helped me.
Anytime.
Very good.
Oh, so this lady was waiting at the other mic, but we never picked on the other mic. You jump ahead. You were waiting patiently.
Thanks. I think that mic's off.
Yeah.
First off, wanted to say if you do go to Alcatraz, you could hold an awesome concert because no one could ever leave.
Yeah.
Good point.
Possible.
Captive audience.
I was wondering how, if you were starting today, you think things would be different.
I feel sorry for bands starting today. I feel like it'd be very hard to get noticed no matter what you did.
I feel like we'd be literally wearing barrels, like with suspenders to hold up like thing that you know about that nobody actually does.
I don't know how. It would be almost impossible. I mean, it seems like well,
we were supremely lucky even when we started, when there still was a music industry. I mean, we were lucky in that regard, but we also had a lot of lucky breaks over the course of that time, even when there was still a bunch of money available for bands, and we fully exploited the major label experience we had and everything. So now we're in a position where we get to exploit this kind of free form, everything's just up for grabs.
I mean, there is a tremendous advantage with things like Kickstarter existing for bands that have a distinct point of view. But I think the thing that's unfortunate about it is that a lot of those best bands don't really ever get a platform to speak to a wider audience. And I think the culture, the bands might be better for it, but I think the culture is worse for it. That somebody with an extreme point of view is actually not pushed on the general public. And so there's something great about the public being tested in that way. Like if somebody actually has a curatorial power over kind of a general audience, it's nice when the Alice Cooper comes along or the Marilyn Manson comes along and goes like, deal with this. And I think that unfortunately we live in this sort of post-insane clown posse world where it's like all those people are just who are predisposed to like that kind of music are just sitting in their mom's basement going, kill, kill, and then nobody else is hearing about it. You know, it doesn't get it. You got to open those windows sometimes.
Right.
Hi, I also wanted to say thank you because, like my sister, you guys saved me on so many tests. Like, probably you're the reason I passed middle school. But also, I was wondering, there's so many songs out there that are like love songs. That's like the majority of songs out there. What made you guys think science? I want to write a song about the elements and the sun. Like, where was your inspiration?
Yeah, we were tasked with writing a science album as part of this Disney series that we did. So there was actually a theme to the science album already kind of ordained, which, you know, in some ways made it easy for us. Like, oh, give us a theme, we'll just write songs about that. But I think they kind of thought we were an appropriate, you know, act to, as opposed to Insane Clown Posse, you know.
Right. Magnets?
It would be a different kind of science album. Yeah, no, we're not, you know, we're not educators. We didn't do super great in school, but we like.
Don't want to talk about it, John.
You know, I think we feel positive about all that you know, informational kind of stuff.
I think we have time for one more.
So you've talked a lot about how you're using digital technology, but in the reverse of that, what was it like working at the Edison Museum and recording there?
Well, that was another like trip into technology because we were invited to record on a wax cylinder recorder, which was a pre-electrical recording device that was developed by the Thomas Edison Laboratory people. And basically, it's a different format, but it's a predecessor to the regular phonograph. But because it doesn't use electricity capturing the performance or reproducing the performance, so you actually have this incredible physical burden of capturing enough sound pressure through a stylus to embed the actual audio into a groove-making machine.
That's right. The energy of the sound is what's driving the little stylus and carving the wax. So that also affects the performance in a way that you can hear on pre-electric recordings very clearly. There's a style of arrangement and performance that is very much shaped by that technological constraint, and it was in our case too. In fact, we had to sing in these old-timey voices in order to be heard properly, and that affected the entire recording. And for some reason, I affected an English voice.
And your pants also moved up.
My pants were much higher. But it was super fun, and we used those recordings on some CDs that so you can hear this stuff we cut at the Edison Laboratory. We also got souvenir wax cylinders.
Yeah, it was just a total like once in a lifetime
really fun, super fun experience.
That guy was smart.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right, one last question for you. Will you play some music for us?
Absolutely.
Let's hear it. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks a lot. Nice talking to you.
John.
Really a pleasure.
Fantastic. Really appreciate it. We're looking forward to hearing you guys play in about half an hour.
All right.
Yes.
So grab some drinks. We've got some food. We've got some beverage.
Great.
We'll be back in half an hour with the Johns and the rest of the band.
See you soon.
Say it.
Go away.
Great job.
Thanks. That was fun.